It was the first week of June in the suburban neighborhood of Maple Grove Estates, a place so pristine that even the mailboxes gleamed in the summer sun. The lawns were symmetrical, the driveways spotless, and the pool, oh, the pool, was the crown jewel of the community. Every summer, families flocked there for barbecues, swimming lessons, and lazy afternoons under striped umbrellas. But this year, something was different. This year, Karen had decided the pool belonged to her. She wasn't officially part of the HOA board. She wasn't elected, nor appointed. But somehow, she had become the self-proclaimed pool monitor. Every day, like clockwork, she arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. Oversized sunglasses, floppy hat, clipboard in hand, ready to maintain order. And in her mind, order meant controlling who used the pool, when they used it, and how loud they were allowed to be. Karen was the type of neighbor who treated the community as her personal kingdom. She knew every rule by heart and invented a few along the way. She claimed to know the HOA handbook better than the actual HOA members did. Some neighbors found her overbearing. Others just tried to avoid her. But as summer began, one particular issue pushed everyone past their limit: the kids. Karen hated noise, laughter, splashing, basically anything that resembled joy. To her, the sound of children playing was disruptive, dangerous, and, as she told anyone who would listen, not in keeping with the peaceful spirit of the neighborhood. So when a group of parents brought their kids to the pool one sunny afternoon, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. She began by enforcing imaginary rules. She told the kids they weren't allowed to use floaties. She said only quiet swimming was permitted. Then, she started keeping a written attendance record, noting every family that came, how long they stayed, and how loud they were. Parents laughed at first, assuming she was joking. But when she posted a sign reading "Children's Pool Hours, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. only," laughter turned into outrage. The sign wasn't official. It wasn't approved by the HOA. It was written in thick black marker on a piece of cardboard, taped right onto the pool gate. But Karen acted as though it were law. She started confronting families who stayed past her approved hours, scolding them like school children. Some left to avoid confrontation. Others stood their ground, but Karen always found a way to make them uncomfortable, snapping photos, writing down license plate numbers, or calling the HOA to report rule violations that didn't exist. One family in particular became her main target: the Martinez family. They had 2 young children, bubbly, energetic twins who loved the water. The parents were polite, hardworking, and always paid their HOA dues on time. But Karen had decided their kids were too rowdy. She filed multiple complaints about them: splashing too much, laughing too loudly, leaving toys on the pool deck. When the HOA dismissed her reports, Karen doubled down. By the 3rd week of June, she made enemies out of nearly every parent in the community. But she didn't see it that way. To her, she was a hero, a protector of neighborhood standards. Every evening, she'd post on the community Facebook group, writing long, self-righteous paragraphs about uncontrolled children, irresponsible parents, and the decay of neighborhood values. Her posts always ended with a thinly veiled threat: "If this continues, I'll take further action." Behind the scenes, the parents began whispering to one another. They met during morning walks, at mailboxes and driveways. Everyone had a Karen story. One mom said Karen measured the pool chlorine herself because she didn't trust the maintenance guy. Another said she tried to make her child take a swimming test before letting him in the deep end, even though she wasn't certified in anything. The stories piled up, and frustration boiled over. One evening, after yet another Facebook rant, Karen went too far. She accused the Martinez kids of damaging community property because a pool noodle had torn during play. She demanded the HOA fine their parents and banned the children from the pool for the rest of the summer. That was the final straw. The HOA refused, of course, but the damage was done. The entire neighborhood had had enough. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. It was about principle. The next morning, Karen woke up to find that no one greeted her on her daily walk. The friendly waves she was used to had vanished. The parents avoided eye contact. Conversations hushed when she passed by. But in her mind, she believed she was being ostracized for enforcing the rules. She saw herself as the victim, misunderstood, underappreciated, and surrounded by chaos she alone was willing to confront. By mid-July, attendance at the community pool had plummeted. Parents didn't want to deal with the confrontation. Kids stayed inside. The once lively summer hub had turned eerily quiet. Karen took this as a sign of her success. She bragged online that discipline was finally being restored. She didn't realize the calm was temporary, that the families weren't retreating but regrouping. Late one Saturday afternoon, something began to shift. The HOA board received a flurry of emails from residents, not about Karen's behavior, but about an idea. The parents had grown tired of being bullied. They were planning something big, something that would teach Karen a lesson she wouldn't forget. It wasn't going to be cruel or illegal, just clever, ironic, and perfectly deserved. While Karen sat on her usual pool chair, clipboard resting proudly on her lap, the rest of the neighborhood was quietly preparing for the great pool party, an event that would flip the script and turn the tables in a way no one saw coming. As the sun began to set and the cicadas hummed in the background, Karen watched the still water, unaware that her carefully controlled world was about to unravel. The parents had a plan, and this time, Karen would be the one caught in the chaos she tried so hard to suppress. In the quiet tension that followed Karen's self-imposed reign over the Maple Grove pool, the neighborhood began to hum with a different kind of energy, one that she didn't notice. Beneath the surface of suburban politeness and forced smiles, a quiet rebellion was forming. The same parents Karen had scolded, photographed, and humiliated were now planning her downfall, not with anger, but with precision. It started innocently, almost accidentally, during a late afternoon conversation near the mailbox pavilion. Mrs. Martinez had run in her neighbor, Tom, the easygoing dad known for grilling burgers every weekend by the pool. As they spoke about Karen's latest incident report, another parent joined, then another. Within minutes, 5 families were standing in a small circle, voices hushed but firm. The same question kept coming up. Why are we letting her ruin our summer? That question spread like wildfire. Soon, it reached the ears of nearly every household in the community, everyone except Karen's. They all had stories. She'd yelled at a teenager for using sunscreen that smelled too fruity. She demanded that a mother remove her baby's float ring because it wasn't regulation size. She even accused a family of water theft for filling up their inflatable pool in their backyard. Enough was enough. The neighborhood decided that confronting her head-on would only feed her sense of power. What they needed was something she couldn't argue with, something so public and undeniable that it would expose her behavior for what it was: obsessive, petty, and cruel. That's when the idea came up: the great pool party. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Every family who had suffered under Karen's rules would come together for one giant community event. A single day when every child could splash, laugh, and play freely. The twist? They'd get full HOA approval, permits, and even local sponsorship. Karen couldn't stop it because, technically, it would be official. And better yet, she'd have to watch as the very thing she tried to suppress, joy, filled the space she claimed to control. To pull it off, the parents worked quietly. They communicated through a private group chat, one carefully titled Summer Fun Planning Committee, so Karen wouldn't suspect anything. They assigned roles. Tom handled the barbecue, the Millers brought decorations, and Mrs. Martinez took charge of speaking with the HOA board. Everyone contributed something, from snacks to pool floats, from music speakers to a bubble machine. It was a united front, a community reborn through shared frustration. The HOA, tired of Karen's daily emails and late-night voicemails, approved the plan almost immediately. The event was described as a summer celebration for families of Maple Grove Estates, complete with games, food, and a lifeguard on duty. It was set for a Saturday afternoon in early August, the peak of summer. The timing was perfect. The kids had been cooped up for weeks, and everyone was desperate for a reason to gather again. Meanwhile, Karen remained blissfully unaware. She noticed the parents seemed oddly cheerful lately, but she assumed it was because of her successful enforcement of order. Her social media posts grew even more self-congratulatory. She thanked herself for restoring peace to the community and warned that any attempt to disrupt the new harmony would be dealt with. Ironically, the peace she bragged about was simply the calm before the storm. As the big day drew closer, the preparations became more elaborate. The Millers ordered a custom banner that read, "Maple Grove Family Pool Day. Everyone's welcome." The kids made handmade posters with water-themed drawings. Even the HOA treasurer offered to cover the cost of lifeguards, snacks, and decorations. Anything to ensure the event was flawless. It wasn't just a party anymore. It was a statement. A declaration that joy belonged to everyone, not just to those who claimed authority without reason. The night before the event, a hush of excitement filled the neighborhood. Parents texted reminders and confirmed food items. Children laid out their swimsuits and floaties, some too excited to sleep. But there was also nervous anticipation. Everyone wondered the same thing. What would Karen do when she found out? Karen, true to form, was already suspicious. That evening, she noticed the pool area was unusually busy with people setting up tables and decorations. She approached, clipboard in hand, and demanded to know what was happening. The HOA president, Mrs. Lang, simply smiled and handed her a copy of the event permit. Karen scanned it, her eyes narrowing at the bolded words, "All residents and families invited." She tried to argue, insisting she hadn't been consulted about the event, but Mrs. Lang calmly reminded her that she wasn't on the board. For the first time in months, Karen found herself without authority. Her title, self-proclaimed or not, meant nothing. The rules she had invented, the control she had seized, the fear she had built, all of it dissolved in a single piece of paper. Still, she wasn't about to surrender quietly. Not Karen. That night, she stayed up late drafting posts on the community Facebook page. Her words dripped with disapproval. She claimed the event was unsafe, unnecessary, and potentially destructive to community property. She even warned that the pool's chlorine levels might not be up to standard, a not-so-subtle attempt to discourage attendance. But the parents ignored her. The post was met with silence. No likes, no comments, just a long, empty thread that screamed one message loud and clear. Her power was slipping. The morning of the party arrived hot and golden, sunlight glinting off the still pool water. Decorations fluttered in the breeze. The smell of grilled burgers and sunscreen filled the air. One by one, families arrived, laughing, chatting, arms full of snacks and pool toys. The atmosphere buzzed with freedom, like the first day of summer break. Children raced toward the water, squealing as they jumped in, their splashes echoing across the pool deck. And then, as if on cue, Karen appeared. She stood at the gate, dressed as always in her sun hat and visor, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Her lips pursed as she scanned the crowd. The laughter, the color, the chaos. It was everything she had fought against. Her face flushed as she realized that not only had the HOA approved the event, but they'd given her no say in it whatsoever. The power dynamic she had built all summer was gone. Still, she wasn't ready to let go. She hovered by the gate, scribbling furiously on her clipboard, muttering to herself about violations and sanitation standards. The parents noticed her, but said nothing. They didn't confront her, didn't mock her, didn't acknowledge her. They simply carried on, swimming, laughing, celebrating. It was the ultimate insult. She was irrelevant. For the first time, Karen felt something she hadn't experienced in years: isolation. Her authority had always relied on fear and compliance. Without that, she was just another neighbor with a clipboard and too much time. She stood there, rigid and powerless, as the neighborhood came alive around her. By afternoon, her frustration boiled over. She stormed toward the HOA president, demanding the event be shut down immediately. But this time, her words carried no weight. Mrs. Lang simply handed her a paper plate of food and walked away, leaving Karen frozen in disbelief. The world she had built, one of control and complaint, was slipping from her grasp. And as the sound of children's laughter filled the air once more, she realized this was only the beginning of her unraveling. The pool she once ruled was no longer hers to command. But in her mind, this wasn't defeat, it was betrayal. She would not let it stand. The pool party had ended in triumph for everyone. Everyone except Karen. While the rest of Maple Grove basked in the afterglow of laughter, music, and a rare sense of community, Karen sat in her immaculate living room that evening, seething. Her blinds were half closed, but she peeked through them every few minutes, staring at the remnants of the celebration. Balloons still bobbed lazily in the breeze. Someone had forgotten a floatie near the gate. The sound of distant chatter still drifted through the night air. It all grated on her nerves like nails on glass. To Karen, what had happened wasn't just a neighborhood party. It was an act of rebellion, a direct challenge to her authority. She told herself that the residents had been manipulated, that the HOA had been deceived, that chaos was returning because she, the only person who truly cared about order, had been ignored. She couldn't see that the neighborhood's joy wasn't chaos at all. It was relief. As the evening deepened, Karen's anger took on a new form, resolve. She would strike back. The families thought they could embarrass her, but she would remind them that Maple Grove Estates was built on rules, and she knew every single one. The next morning, she started early. Her first step was to collect evidence. She walked to the pool area with her phone, snapping photos of everything. An empty soda can here, a scuff mark on the deck there, a paper plate caught under a chair. She zoomed in dramatically on the smallest imperfections, narrating quietly to herself about property damage and neglect. When she reached the pool filters, she even crouched down, pretending to inspect the system for contamination. It didn't matter that the maintenance staff had already cleaned everything up. In Karen's mind, she was building a case. By noon, she compiled a 12-page incident report, complete with time-stamped photos, exaggerated claims, and a list of supposed violations. She emailed it to the HOA board with the subject line, "Urgent, public safety and conduct concerns at community pool event." Her message dripped with self-righteousness. She claimed the chlorine levels were dangerously low, that the noise exceeded city limits, and that several attendees had engaged in disruptive or unsafe behavior. She even alleged that unsupervised children were endangering themselves and others, a claim that would have been comical if she weren't so serious. The HOA board, however, had reached their limit with her antics. They responded politely but curtly, thanking her for the concern and assuring her that everything had been handled according to policy. Karen took that as an insult. How dare they dismiss her warnings? Didn't they realize she was the only one paying attention? That night, she decided to escalate. Karen printed copies of her report, dozens of them, and began slipping them into mailboxes around the neighborhood. She titled it "A Message from a Concerned Resident." Each packet included photos from the event, a long rant about declining standards, and even a section urging residents to demand accountability from the HOA. She distributed them under the cover of darkness, her slippers crunching softly on the gravel as she moved from house to house like a suburban vigilante. By morning, Maple Grove was buzzing again, not with laughter this time, but disbelief. Parents found the pamphlets waiting in their mailboxes, dripping with condescension and paranoia. Some laughed, others rolled their eyes. But a few, especially those who had tried to stay neutral, began to feel uneasy. Karen's words had a way of stirring guilt, even when it wasn't deserved. That was her real skill, manipulation wrapped in civility. But her plan began to backfire almost immediately. Tom, the neighborhood dad with the easy smile and barbecue apron, decided to post one of Karen's flyers in the community Facebook group. He didn't add any commentary. He just uploaded the images with the caption, "Found this in my mailbox. Anyone else get one?" Within an hour, the post exploded with reactions. Laughter, sarcasm, even memes. Someone photoshopped Karen's face onto a pool patrol badge. Another edited her report into a fake movie poster titled "The Chlorine Crusader." The ridicule spread faster than she could have imagined. Karen's attempt to shame the neighborhood had turned into a spectacle, and she was the star of it. When she logged onto the Facebook group that afternoon, she saw hundreds of comments, jokes, and screenshots. Her heart raced. Her palms grew sweaty. She typed furious replies defending herself, but no one took her seriously anymore. The power she once held, the fear she inspired, had vanished overnight. Every word she wrote only fueled the fire. Still, Karen wasn't one to admit defeat. If the residents wouldn't listen to her, she would find someone who would. So, she called the city inspector's office. With her most serious tone, she claimed the HOA pool was poorly maintained, citing chemical imbalances and unsafe overcrowding. She mentioned that the HOA had ignored repeated safety warnings. She didn't mention that those warnings were her own. The city, obligated to respond to such complaints, scheduled a routine inspection for the following week. To Karen, this was her grand comeback, the moment she would prove everyone wrong. When the day came, she stood at her window, watching smugly as the white city vehicle pulled up near the pool. She followed at a distance, pretending to be just another concerned resident. The inspector walked around, took notes, tested the water, and spoke briefly with the HOA president. Karen waited, practically vibrating with anticipation. But when the results came back, they couldn't have been further from what she hoped. The report declared the pool to be fully compliant and well-maintained. The chlorine levels were perfect. The safety measures were sound. Even the inspector noted that community involvement appears strong and positive. It was the final blow to Karen's crusade. The HOA publicly shared the inspection results in the Facebook group, thanking the community for a successful event and excellent cooperation. Though they didn't mention her by name, everyone knew who the concerned resident had been. Karen's defeat was complete, but she refused to see it. In her mind, the neighborhood was conspiring against her. The laughter outside her window sounded crueler now. The neighbors' waves seemed mocking. The children's voices felt like a personal attack. The once bright and orderly world she had built was crumbling into chaos, and she blamed everyone but herself. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, her clipboard resting beside a half-empty cup of tea. The papers she'd written, the photos she'd taken, all of it seemed meaningless now. For the first time, doubt began to flicker behind her eyes. But pride smothered it quickly. She told herself she wasn't wrong, just misunderstood. And if no one else would uphold the rules, she would. Karen wasn't done. Not yet. She had one last idea, a plan that would push the neighborhood's patience to its breaking point. It wouldn't just be about the pool anymore. It would be about control. And this time, she would make sure they couldn't ignore her. By the time August rolled into its humid middle stretch, Maple Grove Estates had become a battleground, not of noise or chaos, but of quiet hostility. The smiles between neighbors had grown tight, polite, and fleeting. Conversations dropped into whispers whenever Karen appeared. But beneath the surface of suburban civility, both sides were preparing for something bigger. The families wanted peace. Karen wanted control, and neither was willing to back down. After the failed inspection stunt, Karen felt publicly humiliated. Her long-standing illusion of authority had been shattered, and in her mind, the HOA was to blame. They dismissed her warnings, mocked her concerns, and, worst of all, sided with the very people she viewed as reckless rule breakers. But Karen wasn't one to accept defeat. She believed every system could be exploited if you knew the right levers to pull. And Karen knew the HOA's rules better than anyone, perhaps better than the HOA itself. So, she began to weaponize them. Her first move was subtle. She started filing formal complaints, not emails, not notes, but official grievance forms. Every minor infraction became a documented offense. A lawn a shade too brown? Violation. Trash bins left out after pickup? Violation. Decorative flags on porches that didn't match the approved aesthetic? Violation. The HOA office began to drown in paperwork, all signed in neat cursive under her full name. Karen L. Whitmore, resident of Maple Grove Estates. Within 2 weeks, she'd filed over 40 complaints. At first, the HOA board ignored most of them, knowing her history. But Karen was persistent. She attended meetings, cited bylaws, and quoted obscure sections of the community charter no one else had ever bothered to read. She spoke with the righteous calm of someone who believed the rules were sacred texts, and she was their prophet. To make matters worse, she began recruiting. A handful of residents, mostly retirees who preferred silence over laughter, started listening to her. They didn't fully agree with her tactics, but Karen had a way of making people feel like victims of neighborhood decay. She played to their fears, property values dropping, rules being ignored, standards slipping. Within a month, she formed a small but vocal faction, the Preservation Committee. With her new committee, Karen launched her next campaign, a petition to restore decorum and safety in Maple Grove. The document, filled with buzzwords and vague promises, circulated door to door. Most residents refused to sign, but a few did, just to avoid confrontation. Karen didn't need many. She needed enough to make noise. By the next HOA meeting, she arrived with her usual clipboard, but this time it was full of signatures. She presented it with pride, standing tall before the board as though she were addressing Congress. She demanded stricter enforcement of pool regulations, limited hours for youth activity, and fines for disruptive gatherings. Her tone was calm, measured, but beneath it, her resentment simmered. The HOA listened, took notes, and promised to review the matter. But no action followed, and that was the moment Karen snapped. The next day, she declared war, quietly but decisively. She began monitoring the pool again, even though her authority had long been revoked. She timed swimmers, measured water temperatures, and logged unauthorized visitors. She stood near the entrance with her clipboard, pretending to welcome residents, but really just noting who arrived and when. Her presence alone was enough to make parents turn around. Attendance plummeted again, and the laughter that had returned to the neighborhood began to fade. But this time, the HOA was watching. Unbeknownst to Karen, several residents had started recording her behavior. Videos of her pacing the pool deck, confronting families, and taking photos of children began circulating privately in the community chat. They didn't post them publicly. Not yet, but they were building a record the same way she had built hers. The difference was their evidence was real. Then came the night of the storm. A heavy summer thunderstorm rolled in, bringing sheets of rain and booming thunder. The pool was closed as per HOA rules, but Karen was there anyway. She stood under the covered patio, glaring at the empty water as if guarding it from invisible intruders. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating her silhouette against the downpour. To anyone watching, she looked less like a protector and more like a ghost haunting her own obsession. The next morning, residents discovered that several new signs had been posted around the pool. No loud play. No swimming without Karen's authorization. Respect the quiet zone. Each one was printed in large block letters, laminated, and zip-tied to the fence. No one knew how she'd gotten access to the pool area after hours, but everyone knew who had done it. That was the final straw for the HOA. The board convened an emergency meeting, calling in residents to address the growing tension. Dozens showed up, some angry, some exhausted, some just curious. Karen arrived fashionably late, as if she were walking into a courtroom drama. Clipboard in hand, she took her seat at the front row, ready to defend her crusade. But this meeting would not go as she planned. One by one, the residents spoke, calmly, respectfully, but firmly. They described her behavior, the surveillance, the intimidation, the unapproved signs. Parents explained how their children were afraid to swim, how the sense of community had been destroyed. Even her few supporters remained silent, eyes downcast. Then, the HOA president projected something on the wall, a short compilation of footage. Karen at the pool, pacing, filming kids, arguing with parents. The room fell silent. Karen's face went pale. She tried to interject, but the president's voice cut through the tension. This has gone too far. The board voted unanimously to issue a formal cease and desist notice, banning Karen from the pool area entirely and warning her that further interference would result in legal action. For a long moment, she didn't move. The room watched as her shoulders stiffened, her hands clenched, and her jaw tightened. She gathered her papers, rose slowly, and left without a word. Outside, the night was warm and heavy with the scent of rain. The pool shimmered under the lamplight, quiet and still. Karen stood at the gate, staring at the reflection of the water. The same water she'd once ruled like a monarch. Her reflection looked back at her, small and trembling in the ripples. For the first time, she didn't feel powerful. She felt alone. But even as she walked home under the flickering streetlights, a thought burned in her mind. They think they've won. She wasn't finished yet. Not in her own neighborhood. Not on her watch. The HOA might have silenced her publicly, but Karen was already planning her next move, something beyond rules and reports. Something that would shake Maple Grove to its core. Because in her mind, the war had only just begun. For several weeks, after her public humiliation at the HOA meeting, Karen disappeared from sight. Her daily walk stopped. The familiar click of her sandals along the sidewalks was gone. The pool sat peacefully under the sun, filled once again with the laughter she had tried so hard to silence. Parents relaxed, children played freely, and Maple Grove began to heal. But while the neighborhood moved on, Karen's absence wasn't peace. It was the calm before another storm. Inside her home at the end of Alder Lane, the curtains remained drawn. Neighbors saw her car in the driveway, but the lights rarely turned on. Behind those walls, Karen was stewing, not with mere anger, but with something heavier, obsession. Her world had shrunk to the size of her grievances. Every perceived slight replayed in her mind like a broken film reel. The laughter at the pool party, the whispers of the mailbox, the HOA president's tone when reading the cease and desist notice. She couldn't stop hearing the laughter. She couldn't stop seeing the faces. To her, it wasn't over. It couldn't be. She began to gather evidence again, but this time it wasn't about pool rules or property violations. It was personal. She dug through old HOA meeting minutes, recorded snippets of neighborhood conversations she overheard for her porch, and kept detailed notes about who talked to whom and when. Every innocent detail became part of her imagined conspiracy. She convinced herself that the HOA had overstepped its power, that she, in fact, was the victim of harassment. It wasn't a loss of control, she reasoned. It was persecution, and she would expose it. Her plan was slow, methodical, and dangerous in its precision. She began drafting a formal complaint, not to the HOA this time, but to the County Housing Authority. In it, she accused the HOA of corruption, bias, and financial misconduct. She claimed funds had been misused and safety regulations ignored. None of it was true, but Karen believed it was. Her delusion had wrapped itself so tightly around her ego that reality no longer fit inside. Meanwhile, the neighborhood enjoyed its first truly peaceful month in years. Families gathered at the pool on weekends again. Barbecues returned. Children's laughter echoed down the streets like a song of defiance. For the first time, Maple Grove felt like a community again. But late at night, a shadow still watched from behind drawn curtains. Karen's house became the neighborhood's silent monument to resentment. She rarely answered the door. Packages piled on her porch. A few well-meaning neighbors tried to check on her, but she brushed them off with curt words through the door. They eventually stopped trying. Then, one morning in early September, a new sign appeared on the community bulletin board. Special HOA audit requested by county authorities. The residents were shocked. No one had seen it coming. The HOA president called an emergency meeting to discuss the surprise inspection, and speculation rippled through the neighborhood. Some assumed it was random. Others suspected an external complaint. But everyone knew, deep down, who was behind it. Karen had returned to the battlefield. The inspectors arrived 2 weeks later, combing through HOA files, financial records, and maintenance logs. They interviewed board members and even a few residents. For days, whispers filled the streets. Karen watched it all unfold from her window, sipping tea with a smug satisfaction that bordered on mania. To her, this was justice, a reckoning for the way they'd humiliated her. But justice was not on her side. The inspectors found nothing. No fraud, no mismanagement, no rule-breaking. In fact, They commended the HOA for its transparency and well-documented records. The report, when released, was scathing, not toward the HOA, but toward the anonymous complainant, whose accusations were baseless and malicious. Though they never named her, everyone knew who it was. And just like that, Karen's last shred of credibility disintegrated. That night, her name became a joke whispered over backyard fences. Even her few supporters quietly distanced themselves. The HOA finally had legal grounds to take stronger action. A lawyer drafted an official warning letter, citing defamation, harassment, and interference in community operations. If she continued her behavior, they would file a restraining order. For most people, that would have been the end. For Karen, it was the breaking point. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, slipped neatly into her mailbox. She read it once, twice, 3 times. Her hands trembled. The words blurred as fury consumed her. In her mind, it wasn't justice. It was betrayal. The people she'd tried to protect had turned against her, and now they wanted to silence her completely. That evening, she sat on her back porch as the sky dimmed into orange and purple. The neighborhood buzzed faintly with life. Kids on bikes, dogs barking, sprinklers hissing. She stared at the glow of the pool lights in the distance. That pool had been her domain, her stage, her symbol of control. Now it mocked her from afar, shimmering with defiance. Something in her snapped. By midnight, the streets were quiet. The pool area was empty, locked as usual. But security cameras would later show a lone figure slipping through the gate, a small woman in a windbreaker, clutching something under her arm. She moved with the precision of someone who'd memorized every inch of the place. For 20 minutes, she wandered the deck, muttering to herself. Then she knelt by the fence and began hanging something. New signs handwritten in bold letters. Pool closed until further notice. Under investigation, do not enter. She zip-tied them to the gate, just like she had before. It was a desperate attempt to reclaim authority, a last gasp of control in a world that no longer respected her. But when dawn broke, the neighborhood woke to see the signs, and the truth was undeniable. The HOA called the police that morning. No arrests were made, but the incident was documented. Karen received an official trespassing notice. The HOA padlocked the pool gate and changed the access code. For the first time, she was completely banned, not just from the pool, but from the very community space she had tried to rule. That evening, as the sun set over Maple Grove, the parents gathered at the park, exhausted but united. They talked quietly about what had happened. The years of tension, the escalation, the chaos that had turned their quiet neighborhood into a drama. There was sympathy, even pity, but mostly relief. Karen's grip on their lives was finally broken. At her house, Karen watched from her window once again. The laughter had returned. The lights glowed warmly in the distance. But this time, there was no anger left in her, only a hollow stillness. The war she had waged had cost her everything. Her peace, her friends, her reputation. And yet, even as the darkness settled in, she whispered to herself that she'd been right all along. Summer's end arrived slowly that year, the kind of soft, golden decline where the air cools but the light still shimmers on the surface of the pool. Maple Grove had changed. The laughter returned, the fear was gone, and peace, long overdue, settled over the neighborhood like a deep exhale. The HOA had moved on from Karen's final stunt. New signs were posted, this time official ones, declaring the pool hours and safety regulations in large, cheerful letters. There were no arbitrary rules about age, noise, or pool toys. Children were welcome again, and families filled every corner of the deck on weekends. The community, once divided, had healed itself through unity, through laughter, forgiveness, and resilience. Karen, however, had faded into the background. After her trespassing notice, she rarely ventured outside. Her once meticulous yard grew untrimmed, and the flowers she used to water every morning wilted away. The woman who had once marched the sidewalks like a self-appointed warden was now just another shuttered house in a bright neighborhood. Some said she was too ashamed to show her face. Others believed she was plotting another move. But the truth was simpler. She was done. In the quiet of her living room, she spent her days staring at the HOA letters still pinned to her corkboard, yellowed from time. The cease and desist, the audit report, the trespass warning, they were relics of a battle she refused to admit she had lost. Yet life went on without her. The neighborhood hosted its biggest event of the year in early October, the annual Fall Festival. It was a celebration of everything Maple Grove stood for: togetherness, family, and fun. This year, the HOA had chosen the pool area as the main venue, transforming it into a glowing carnival of lights and laughter. Fairy lights wrapped around the fences, music played softly from speakers, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. Parents chatted over picnic tables. Kids splashed in the water, even though the evening chill nipped at their skin. For once, there were no arguments, no complaints, no tension. It was perfect, the kind of night that made all the years of chaos feel distant and small. But a few streets away, behind closed curtains, Karen sat in the dark, staring at the faint glow of the pool lights reflecting on her window pane. That glow used to be hers, the light of authority, of control, of order. Now, it mocked her in silence. She turned on the local neighborhood channel out of habit. The HOA broadcast updates there sometimes, and tonight, they were streaming the festival live. The camera panned over laughing families, happy faces, and the sparkling pool. The crowd cheered as the HOA president, the same one Karen had tried to undermine, stepped forward with a microphone to thank everyone for bringing Maple Grove back together. Karen's face twisted as she watched. Her legacy, the order she had fought to maintain, was gone, replaced by the very chaos she'd sworn to prevent. But as the speech ended, something unexpected happened. The camera zoomed in on the pool's new dedication plaque. The HOA had decided to name the pool after the neighborhood's resilience, the Maple Grove Family Pool. Below that, in smaller letters, it read, "A reminder that this community belongs to everyone." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't mocking. It was a message, gentle, direct, and final. For the first time, Karen felt the full weight of her choices. Every argument, every letter, every glare across the fence. It all came rushing back in flashes of regret and disbelief. She had lost not just control, but belonging. The pool had never been hers to protect or to police. It had been theirs, the community's. And now, she wasn't part of it. Outside, the sound of fireworks burst through the air, the festival's finale. The sky lit up in color, reflected perfectly in the still surface of the pool. Children squealed, parents cheered, and for a moment, it was pure joy. But amid that celebration, something poetic happened. A gust of wind blew through the street, strong enough to tug at the brittle edges of Karen's neglected lawn decorations. The once proud sign by her porch that read, "Neighborhood Watch Captain," a leftover from her self-imposed title, loosened from its stake and fell face down into the dirt. The sound was faint, but she heard it clearly through the window. She didn't move to pick it up. She just sat there, watching the reflection of the fireworks fade into darkness, realizing, perhaps for the first time, that the fight had never been against the HOA or the parents or the children. It had always been against herself. Weeks later, the story of Karen became a quiet legend in Maple Grove. New families moved in and heard whispers of the pool Karen, who once tried to ban kids. They laughed, but it was a gentle kind of laughter, one that came with understanding. The older residents remembered the tension, the endless meetings, the frustration, but they also remembered how it ended, with unity. Karen eventually put her house up for sale. No one saw her leave. The moving truck came early in the morning, and by noon, she was gone, leaving behind an empty house, a cracked bird bath, and a legacy of caution. The neighborhood didn't celebrate her departure. They didn't need to. Her story had already served its purpose, a reminder of what happens when control replaces compassion, when rules overshadow reason. That winter, the HOA placed a new bench near the pool gate. A small plaque on it read, "Sit, breathe. Remember, this place is for everyone." And that was the quiet victory. The the poetic justice that outlasted any revenge. Karen had tried to control the community, but in the end, she had united it. The children who once cried under her glares now grew up swimming freely, laughing without fear. The parents who once dreaded HOA emails now volunteered for events. Maple Grove had become what it was always meant to be, a home. And as the seasons changed, the pool remained calm, bright, and open. A symbol not of control, but of community.